right there is the door of no return. Closer to the door of no return lie two dungeons. These dungeons are the female dungeons. In each one of them were 250 women. 250 there and 250 here. So that means there were 500 women in the female dungeons. But the English colonizers would go through the doors to sexually abuse the African women in the female dungeons. However, there were some African women who didn't allow them to sexually abuse them. Those women were held in this small cell to be sanctioned or punished. Not less than 8 women were brought in at a time and locked them up. It was in this small cell that the women would menstruate, they defecated, they had rashes on their bodies. There was a wide and massive influx of mosquitoes. Hey, this place was hell. Careful, there's a hole there for a big hole. This one. Alright, so this place is the female dungeon. And I did mention of 2 female dungeons. The other female dungeon is opposite this one. Each one of them were 250. So that means there were 500 women in the female dungeons. The only source of light and air for the African woman in the female dungeon were these 3 holes. 1, 2, 3. Now there was a wide spread of diseases. Yellow fever, cancer, malaria, a lot, diarrhea, a lot. Women were sexually abused. But before the English colonizers took the African women out there to sexually abuse them, they performed some weird exercise, to find out if those women were on their menstrual periods or not. If those women weren't, would take them out there to clean them and sexually abuse them. Because of that, many African women got pregnant in the female dungeons. All the African women who got pregnant in the female dungeons were taken outside the slave castle to give birth. The children to whom the African woman gave birth to had names such as Johnson, Wilson, Peterson, Blankson, Addison, Swansea, Van Dals, Smith, and many more. They were biracial children. Remember back in the male dungeon, I made mention of the fact that there was a church on top of the male slave dungeon. That church was a school also. The first European schools in Ghana are called castle schools. All the biracial children were educated in the church or in school. They were the very people who were the privileged ones amongst the African people. They were not enslaved people. Neither were they kept in dungeons to be shipped off to their murders. They had some freedom and right. And some of them, because of that, they were not proud to be called black people or African people. And that brought a psychological discrimination amongst the African people. I am better than you. Some of the mothers were brought back to the dungeons. And the mothers, the African women, were not even respected by the English colonizers, although they had children with them. They never called them wives or girlfriends. They called them wench. And a wench is a prostitute.
You know how we
Please come. Alright, so this is the door of no return. And the original door of no return used to be a very small door right here. Very tiny door. Just located right here. We call this door the door of no return because this was the final exit of all enslaved African people. Once our ancestors walked through this door, they never came back to Africa. It was at this very point that a new journey emerged and an end of an experience was totally disconnected. The Africans were all in chains and shackles. The African men had to crawl through this door. However, the big slave ships that transported our ancestors from here to the Americas were anchored about 100 meters away from here. But the English colonizers would bring small slave boats closer to the castle and force a few Africans onto and transport them to the bigger slave ships. In that order, all the enslaved Africans were onto the bigger slave ships. And then the journey will begin. The journey from here to the Americas is called the Middle Passage. It's scary and dangerous. During the slave trade, the English colonizers had 13 colonies in the US. Over 40% of all enslaved African people who were forcibly transported from the West African region to the Americas were being transported by the Portuguese. And Portuguese normally transported Africans to Brazil. That is why Brazil has a very large population of African people. Today we are going to walk through a door millions of our ancestors walked through and they never came back to Africa. Today we are going to walk through a door that millions walked through and their identities, heritage, culture was totally disconnected from them. But I've come to tell you that death is not the end. Black energy never dies. Please come. Mention of the fact that this structure is not part of the castle system. This is a fishing harbor constructed by the government of Ghana just recently, and it was done in order to support the local fishermen that you can see their homes right here. I want to confirm when the African men were working through this door of no return, this was the final exit of the English colonizers. This has a psychological interpretation. Christians, slaves, human beings, animals. That's the meaning. But today we have the door we call the door of return. The door of return is different than the door of no return. There are two separate doors. The door of return is not part of the castle system. It was not part of the castle system. When Cape Coast Castle was built in the year 1665, there was no door of return. This door was only introduced in the year 1998. Before this door had to be introduced, there were skeletons of two people that were brought back to Africa. These two people are called Samuel Carson and Madame Crystal. Samuel Carson and Madame Crystal were enslaved African people who were forcibly transported from the West African region to Jamaica and to New York. Samuel Carson to New York in the US and Madame Crystal to Jamaica. He died and were buried there respectively. In 1998, their skeletons were exhumed from their graves and brought to Accra. From Accra, they brought them to a place called Abanse. From Abanse, they transported them across the Atlantic Ocean through the door of return. Because it was across the Atlantic Ocean that millions of the enslaved African people were forcibly transported to the New World. Now this door is to encourage the global African diaspora to return to their roots because the ancestors never returned or never came back to Africa. Now the remains or the skeletons of Samuel Carson and Madame Crystal are reburied at a place called Asin Manson Slave River site. Your tour is not completed until you go there. It was at Asin Manson River site that millions of enslaved African people took their last bath. You know, some of them were from Mali, Burkina Faso, they walked to their last bath there before they brought them here. Because once you come to the dungeon as an enslaved African man, woman, or teenager, you become a merchandise, not a human being. Any questions, please?